Hi everyone, I was called to make this video after several days of having an event recur, and Spirit said, please get out there and teach the people. So this video is on the subject of who funded Christ's ministry. And this is a great subject because it's kind of a lot of parts. So bear with me, please, all the way to the end so you can hear the whole message. So, Christ, the whole story of Christ being funded was something that I don't think a lot of people really understood, because everything that you know about Christ is that he was performing miracles, etc., etc. And although there's a lot of truth in that, he learned about manifestation and he learned about universal laws, so he was able to create what people perceive as miracles, because everything's a miracle, including you. Okay? But he also understood God and he worked for God. And God, if God wanted Christ to be wealthy, God would have put him in a wealthy family, but God didn't, because God had a divine plan both for Christ as well as for everybody that followed or encountered Christ. And that's how God worked. Christ, a lot of times, is an ascended master, and a lot of times, all of the ascended masters who are on the earth even now are given very, very painful and difficult lives at first, because they are needed to step into their remembrance of who they are and why they came to the earth to assist in the Great Rescue Mission. And that, so a lot of times, ascended master souls or the 144,000th, they're going to have very challenging lives because they are needed to awaken, and sometimes the only way to awaken is through great tribulation. So Christ spent a lot of his early years in his life being very impoverished. He spent his whole life basically being impoverished, except for the resources that he was given through his followers. And some of the people who funded his ministry were very wealthy men who followed and loved his work and gave him enough support that he was able to disperse it between himself and the 12 apostles that worked with him, so that they could go ahead and spread his word. He also was funded by women who followed his work and who benefited from his teachings. And one of the women who was one of his greatest supporters was also his counterpart, his divine twin flame counterpart, Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was the one who actually had the resources that funded him. And I find this to be a little interesting, because a lot of Christian believers believe that the man is the head of the household and the provider and this, that, and the other. And that's not always how God works. And Christ is a perfect example of that. So if you're claiming to be Christian and you're repressing divine feminine energy, then you're still not getting the message. But this begs to question a lot of other areas in the spiritual community now, because I know that there's a lot of people in the spiritual community that are condemning anybody who's doing God's work and saying you should be like Christ and you should do it for free. And a lot of us do a lot of what we do for free. Like myself, 90% of my work I do for free. I do pro bono. I spend morning, noon, and night doing this work, and I don't get paid for any of it except for my private sessions and a couple of my private workshops and channelings that I do. If I'm called by Spirit to host them as private, then I do. And sometimes I'm called to make them public and free, and I do that as well. And I've been teaching Ascension since I ascended almost 20 years ago, and I've been teaching ever since then. And so, in the beginning of the years of my ascension, I worked just like Christ. I let go of my house, I let go of my 3D job, I gave up my career. I had several college degrees, and I was a journalist and a realtor. Different timelines there, but I had plenty of background experience and education and skills and jobs that were very well paying and lucrative. I gave all of that up and I walked with God, and I even gave up my house and went and lived in my car, and everyone thought I was nuts. But I was walking with God, and I was trusting the path of beginning to follow the spirit world instead of being wired into the 3D matrix. And that's often the path that an ascended master teacher will go through, because they have to get the codes first, and they really have to walk through that journey before they can teach others. And during the time that I was living in my car, at first I still worked those jobs. And when I worked those jobs, I found that I couldn't do God's work, and God asked me to stop and to commit my whole self to the work that God wanted me here for. So I did. And secondly, I began to just work for free and live in my car and try to get support from people. And many times I asked for donations when I was giving tremendously rich information freely day in and day out, and I was suffering, and nobody offered me donations at all for several years. And after that, God taught me that I needed to have healthy boundaries, even as an ascension teacher, because just like with Christ's ministry, there were going to be those who valued him and his work, and there were going to be those who didn't and wanted to crucify him, just as they're doing with every other ascension teacher on earth right now. So, one of the battles that we're experiencing in the ascension community is that we have an infiltration of dark beings who work against the light, who poses light. And one of the things that they're trying to do is hold down the frequency of the way showers. And one of the ways that they do that is to condemn and shame them for having physical needs. And that is not in alignment with source. Because the ascended master souls have already gone back to God, we've already graduated the test on earth, and now it's really us that's being used to help test others. And many are being tested in that regard, because if you're not valuing the other person, then you're also not living in alignment with source. Love is a circle, and so even though it's an ascended master teacher, they're still worthy of love as well. And so God is testing the whole collective in many different ways. And that is one way that people in the spiritual community, you can see whether they're really living in alignment with source or not, by whether or not they value the other person and the other person's energy and gifts and knowledge and wisdom, and really what it took to get that enlightened wisdom, because for most of us it was gruesome. So now you understand that Christ was actually funded by his own supporters and his own followers also. And so it's very natural for that to be the case. It's just like anything else. If you want somebody to make you a sandwich and you go to Subway, you're going to honor their energy and you're going to support them back and charge the fee that they ask if you agree to it. It's an agreement, just like anything else. And maybe you can think about that the next time you're seeing somebody that's all the time giving good information and you're getting help from it, that they're actually, they're doing it to help you. You can help back too, or you can buy them a cup of tea, or you can, send them a $20 to let them get a sandwich that day. It doesn't hurt to love back. That's the way. That is the way in the spirit world. And the ascended masters are aware of humanity's discordance to the spirit laws, so they're trying to help teach. But in some ways, part of your lessons is that you can learn to love them too. Now, with all that said, I will consent to the fact that there are many false prophets in the spiritual community, fake psychics and fake claim to be ascension teachers, and they've never returned back to God. They've never left the time metrics. They don't know anything about time travel or any of that. That's when you know that they're liars, and even they'll tell you that they can do those things and they haven't, and they're liars. And I condemn them, because I rebuke them, because they work against God. God has a divine order, and God chooses who God feels ready to anoint, and anoints them as to speak on God's behalf. And that's a divine order that happens in the spirit world that should always be honored. And it's not in the human world, because a lot of humans are trying to claim the glory and get monies and things like that when they shouldn't be. And so you always need to use discernment with that. But if it's somebody that you feel resonant with, that you're benefiting from, that is in the light, and you feel it and you're benefiting from their work, then it's perfectly fine to support them. And frankly, we're supposed to love everybody. So love everybody however you love them. And if you're called to help somebody, that is how God works, is God speaks into your heart. And so when somebody comes to me like they did 3 days in a row and shames me for having boundaries with my time and my energy and my gifts, then they're not feeling the spirit in their heart to recognize love and support for me. I'm their sister too. And that's the message. I hope that this resonates. And if you thought that it did, then please share it out to others so that we can help the community to get a little more balance. Namaste.